Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. My name is Cantor Sarah Beck-Berman, and we're waving to Rabbi Scott Nagel and family as they're on their vacation from afar. With me tonight is Heather Dinkin, our Director of Operations, who's running behind the camera, and Natan Berenstein, our music director, who makes silly faces at me sometimes. This evening, we will be using, as we usually do, our Mishkan Tefillah prayer book, which, if you don't have a print copy, can be purchased on Kindle. Be aware that on Kindle it is left to right rather than right to left, which is the typical Hebrew orientation. It's also available as a free flip book, and then a link to access that free flip book, which is right to left Hebrew style, is in both our website calendar entry for Shabbat services every Friday, as well as in the emails that we send out to the congregation to give them the link for the service. In our Shabbat prayer book, many of the prayers are in a 2-page layout. On the right-hand side of the page are the Hebrew transliteration into English characters and translation of a particular prayer. And on the left-hand side, often are other prayers, poems, and readings along the same theme. Please feel free to use whatever is most comfortable and meaningful for you as we progress throughout the service. I will also occasionally give directions like standing up or sitting down, and please feel free to do those things if it's comfortable for you, and to not do them if it's not comfortable or possible for you, wherever you are. So with that, let's buckle up for Shabbat and keep our hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. And we begin tonight actually not in the prayer book, but rather with a nigun, a wordless melody from our friends in Jerusalem, Nava Tehillah. Shabbat Shalom. And as we welcome Shabbat into our midst, We light candles and we say a blessing over grape juice or wine, marking the transition or passage from that regular everyday time into sacred, special Shabbat time. We begin on page 2 in our prayer books. Page 2, as I invite you all to gather your candles, if you wish, and they can be imaginary candles if you don't have them on hand, and your grape juice or wine. We begin by lighting the candles and then saying the blessing together on page 2. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We continue with the Kiddush, our prayer over grape juice or wine, on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron le'maseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. We continue in our service now that we've welcomed Shabbat into our midst with our call to worship together as a community, the Baruch Hu, which can be found on page 28. Page 28 in our prayer books. And would all those who are comfortable please rise? La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. we turn together to the prayer for the evening on page 31. And before we say that prayer, I ask my customary question, which is, what phase is the moon in? The date tonight, if it gives you a hint, in the Hebrew calendar is the 26th of Tammuz, so it's the 26th day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, tonight and tomorrow. And that means we're coming up on the end of the month, so it's a waning crescent moon, and in fact, it's time for us to do that announcement of the upcoming month. So I will say this blessing on behalf of all of us. Our God and God of our ancestors, may the new month bring us goodness and blessing. May we have long life, peace, prosperity, a life exalted by love of Torah and reverence for the divine, a life in which the longings of our hearts are fulfilled for good. Amen. Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av Yiyeh B'Yom Revi'i, which means the Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, the beginning of the new month, of what we're calling Menachem Av, or the month of Av, to which we're adding an attribute of compassion, of Rachamim, because Av has some sad days in it. That new moon will be Tuesday night into Wednesday. So Rosh Chodesh for Av is Tuesday night and Wednesday of this coming week. On page 31, let's read together on the bottom of the page. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it, we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim. We turn to page 34 as we prepare to say the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. We continue with the V'ahavta on page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha Hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, b'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lechtecha v'aderech, uv'shochbecha, uv'kumecha, u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, amen. We continue in our prayer books on page 40 for the Mi Chamocha, our song of freedom. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Amen. At this time, we celebrate Shabbat. Key word, celebrate, with Vishamru, which is on the top of page 44. Vishamru, Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotan Berit Olam. B'nei uven B'nei Yisrael, Uti Le'olam. B'nei uven B'nei Yisrael, Uti Le'olam. Vishamru, Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotan Berit Olam. Ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Vishamru, Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotan Berit Olam. Uvayom hashvi, Shabbat vayinafash. Uvayom hashvi, Shabbat vayinafash. Vishamru, Vishamru, V'nei Israel, et HaShabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. Yeah. We come at this time to the central portion of our service, the Tefillah, which begins with our prayer to open up my lips on page 46, the Adonai Svatai, and continues across the next several pages, but begins on page 46. Please rise. Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei hakol, v'zocher chastei avot ve'imahot, u'mevii geula livnei v'neihem, lema'an shemo be'ahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magein, baruch atah Adonai, magein Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor leolam Adonai, mechayei hakol ata, rav lehoshia, morid hatal, mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayei hakol berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofei cholim, umatir asurim, Umkayem emunato lishenei afar michamocha bal gevurot umido melach melech memit umchaye umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'emanat al hachayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai, mechayei hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yehalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Please be seated. We continue on page 63. We read together in the middle of the page, "We reach for you, our God, from our quiet places. May we stand still for a brief moment and listen to the rain. Stand still for a brief moment and watch the play of sunlight and shadow on the leaves. For a brief moment, listen to the world. Let us stop the wheels of every day to be aware of Shabbat. Find the stillness of the sanctuary which the soul cherished. Renew the covenant of an ancient people. We need a quiet space to test the balance of our days, the weight of our own deeds against the heaviness of the world's demands. The balance is precarious. Steady us with faith. Quiet places in stillness where we will hear our own best impulses speak. Quiet places in stillness from which we will reach out to each other. We will find strength in silence, and with this strength, we will turn again to your service. Please continue with silent prayer and reflection, either using the words on the page or the words in your heart. We continue with Ose Shalom, our prayer for peace, at the bottom of page 62. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom, Bimromav, Bimromav. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom, Bimromav, Bimromav. Uyaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom, Bimromav, Bimromav. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom, Bimromav, Bimromav. Uyaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru, v'imru. Amen. We continue with a prayer for healing. As at this time we think of all those people who are in need of healing, turning to page 253. On page 253 in the indented paragraph is our Mishaberach prayer for healing. And before we say that prayer together, Beth Ahabah is thinking of, in particular this week, David Sachs, Jacques Johnson, and Robert Jerome Koch. And if any of you have names of people whom you'd like me to read during services, or simply people you'd like to say out loud right now, please do so. And if you have names that you'd like me to read, then do send me an email after the service. we think of the names of all these people that you're saying out loud or holding in your heart or typing into the group chat, as we turn together to the Mishaberach prayer for healing on page 253.
Source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu, mekor habracha. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Here we are in the second Shabbat of the 3 weeks, that period of mourning, beginning with the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. Last week, we talked about the fast day of the 17th of Tammuz, as well as the 3 special haftarot passages from the prophets that we read during the Sabbaths of that 3 weeks, which foreshadow, in these prophetic readings, they foreshadow the fall of Jerusalem, and they're called the haftarot of affliction. Last week, in my sermon, we explored a way to interpret these 3 haftarot of affliction by reflecting on them as suggestions for 3 steps of inward contemplation to prepare for Tisha B'Av. Step 1 was to engage in an honest review of how we have responded to challenges in our lives. Step 2 is derived from this week's haftarah. Now that we have taken an honest look at where we are right now, what are the things we could be doing better? Then, after we have identified the things that we wish to improve, we can implement the invitation from the 3rd special haftarah, next week's haftarah, which is to make it so. This week, let us focus and speak more about that 2nd haftarah. This is taken from Jeremiah, which begins where we left off last week, chapter 2, verse 4, all the way through verse 28 of the same chapter. And then, as we'll see, some Jewish communities add chapter 3, verse 4 as a little tag at the end, and others add chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. And we'll see why a little bit later on. In this selection from chapter 2, verses 4 through 28, Jeremiah really lays it on thick. He's condemning in harsh terms and with vivid descriptions the wrongdoings of the Israelite people. And yet, the purpose of the condemnation is to try to convince them to change their ways, to avoid the negative consequences of their actions. We read that Israel has forsaken God as the fountain of living waters in favor of digging cracked cisterns that cannot hold water, that their enemies will break their heads, that they brought this on themselves. Your own wickedness rebukes you, and your betrayals reprove you. Know and see how bad it is and bitter to forsake the eternal your God, to hold me in awe no more. Verse 19. Though you wash yourself with lye and use more and more soap, the stain of your guilt remains before me, says the eternal God. Verse 22. It's pretty heavy stuff. The selection from chapter 2 closes by comparing the people to a wild donkey in heat, meaning they're running wild with all these other gods with no self-control. But it's no use, you say, I have loved strange gods, and after them I must go, in verse 25. What an image, right? And the last verse in our selection, verse 28, and where are your gods, says God, that you have made for yourselves? Let them rise up and save you in your hour of trouble. Judah, you have as many gods as you have towns. Ending the Haftarah with a verse like that would be pretty harsh. Our tradition typically tempers Haftarot that deliver a harsh message with some sort of hopefulness at the end. So it is no wonder that most Jews will either add on chapter 3, verse 4, just now you called to me, Father, you are the companion of my youth. Or other communities add chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. If you return, O Israel, declares the Lord, if you return to me, if you remove your abominations from my presence and do not waver and swear, as the Lord lives in sincerity, justice, and righteousness, nations shall bless themselves by you and praise themselves by you. So both of those are a little bit more of an upper than a downer. Now that we have read some of the highlights of this second Haftarah of affliction, I think it is clear why it's called a Haftarah of affliction, and also I hope it's clear why the message that I drew from it is this: figure out what we are doing wrong or what we could be doing better. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to admit we're wrong. But I love those other gods, it says, right? I like engaging in this behavior. I like hanging out with these people who are a bad influence on me. I like being out of control. It feels good to lose my temper. You're the one who's wrong, and I'm the one who's right. Those are all things that I've said at some point in my life, either in my mind or out loud. In the moment, of course, those things all feel entirely justified. It's all very well and good. To speak about these things intellectually in very general terms, it's a lot more challenging to identify specific examples that happened recently in our own lives. And it is a lot harder to catch those things while they're happening or even before they happen, before the words come out of our mouth. So what is the secret? Like most things, I think the answer is in commitment to the long-term work. There is no quick and easy fix because we, as human beings, are generally speaking not quick and easy to reprogram. Each of us will experience different challenges in our lives that have different answers, and each of us has a different brain from the others, which processes things in different ways. We are all definitely obligated to identify our own responsibility, of course, for the situations in which we find ourselves, and which in many cases, if we're really honest, we have made for ourselves. But there's a difference between taking responsibility and placing blame. Taking responsibility means coming at things from a mature and constructive perspective. Something can be improved. What can I do to improve it? I can do better. What can I do to get better? It's not only about tearing down, for example, the autopilot responses that harm us, but about building up, considering what would work better and taking steps to build those new responses into ourselves. As the therapists and counselors out there could tell us, this is often easier said than done, and yet, when we do that work, the outcome, no matter how difficult the journey, is always worth it. It will always feel better to look inward at ourselves and find more and more things that we like and admire and love about ourselves. Perhaps it's a paradox that engaging in this work of looking inward and identifying negative things or identifying bad things that we want to get rid of is itself an act of self-love. It might not always feel like it, but if we're trying to be better, that's a type of love that we're giving ourselves and all of those around us. It's a love that's through action. Tisha B'Av is coming up at the end of these 3 weeks. It's the saddest day of the Jewish year, commemorating the destruction of both temples across Jewish history. And the rabbis tell us that one of the major sins tied to the destruction of the Second Temple was the sin of baseless hatred. That the healing force to counter that baseless hatred is love. If in these 3 weeks we are able to take the time to work on bettering ourselves, it is an act of love. If in these 3 weeks we are able to expand even beyond working on ourselves and applying these 3 steps to our family dynamics, to our community, it's an act of love. Even, especially when it's hard, we have to remember, v'ahavta, and you shall love. May we be blessed in this coming week with an abundance of love. May we be reminded that every single reason that we have or think we have to hate or dislike ourselves is actually an opportunity to love and improve ourselves. May our work be fruitful. Amen. And Shabbat Shalom. We turn now to page 282, along a not dissimilar theme from my sermon. The Aleinu prayer, which begins in the middle of page 282, begins with the word Aleinu. It's upon us, because all of us have to take responsibility and step forward to do the work that's necessary. So on page 282, at the bottom of the page, and continuing on page 287, please rise for the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'teit idula le'yotzei bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, v'lo zamanu k'mishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim mishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'ne'emor v'haya Adonai v'melech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
You may be seated. At this time, we remember those who have gone before us. As we turn to page 294 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Beth Ahabah is particularly thinking of the family of Tom F. Kelly III, who passed away just recently, as well as the following yard sites or anniversaries of passing: Gerald Bernstein, Dina Boucher, Louis O. Bowman, Irving Brodsky, Alexander Brodsky, Jacob Brown, Frona Fox Evans, Margaret E. Ferris, Lawrence Gavant, Sylvia Gelfand, Joseph Glazer, Celia Goldberg, Dee Dee Goldstein, Paul Gordon, Harriet G. Grandis, Libby Greenberg, Edward S. Hirschler, Henry L. Holtzman, Ruth Kessler, Philip W. Claus, Sr., Morris Landsberg, Aaron Lichtenfeld, Michael David Marks, Walter Herman Mendel, Ada Eisfeld Strauss Nelson, Dorothy C. Packer, Richard D. Paul, Jeffrey Peskin, Mark Putney, Ella K. Rubin, Rita Russ Sager, Phoebe Yulie Saboni, Edward Silverman, Esther Silverman, Roy Spur, Charles Allen Strauss, Leon L. Strauss Jr., Sonia Swerdloff, Pauline Thalheimer, Paula G. Ties, Bernadine Roth Tucker, May W. Wallerstein, Lawrence M. Yaffe, and Belle Zimlin. As we remember those people whom we've loved and lost, I invite all of you to take a moment, and if you're in the period of Shiva, of the 7 days of mourning after a loved one's death, of Shloshim, the 30 days of mourning after a loved one's death, if there is a yahrzeit, an anniversary of passing that you're remembering this week, to share the name or names of those people aloud, in your heart, in the group chat, in a comment. And of course, if there's anyone that you're simply remembering on the occasion of this Shabbat as well, share their names. We think of all these people and the people who have no one to say a Kaddish for them, as I invite those in a period of mourning in Shiva or Shloshim to rise. I invite people observing a yahrzeit or remembering someone this week to rise. And as is our custom at Beth Ahabah, I invite the entire community to rise as you're able, together, in support of one another, as we turn on page 294 and say the Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ul'almei almaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shemei d'Kudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Zichronam Livracha, may their memory be for a blessing. Please be seated. I have a few announcements. Virtual Torah study continues on Thursdays at noon on Zoom. See the e-news or the website calendar for log-in details. Next Friday, please join us here again virtually. There is a Zoom pre-neg, so a gathering on Zoom before the service at 5:30, hosted by the Brotherhood, and followed by a Shabbat service here on YouTube at 6:15. Also, please note in your email that we sent out a link for an in-person Shabbat and High Holiday Services survey. We would really, really like your feedback, every single family in Beth Ahabah, so please fill out that survey, and the deadline is next Thursday, July 23rd. Also, mark your calendars for a virtual candlelight Tisha B'Av service with me on Wednesday, July 29th, beginning at 7 p.m., and that will be on YouTube. Religious school registration is open on our website. Please see the e-news or click the Education tab on the website to register for religious school. To register or to find more information on any of these programs or events, please check out your e-news and the website calendar. Before we conclude our service tonight, a few blessings, family blessings, pet blessings. So hug them if you got them, I guess, as long as it's safe to do so and desirable to do so. Yisimech Elohim Kesara, Rivka, Rachel, Velea, and Yisimcha Elohim Ke'Ephraim V'chi Menashe. May God inspire you to live like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, as well as Ephraim and Menashe, who led forth our people, all of them with strength. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav eilecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav eilecha v'yasem lecha, Shalom. May we find peace in the coming week and strength. Amen. And for our pets, for our cats, may God make you like the Lion of Judah. For our dogs, may God make you like Caleb, the loyal one. And I've got one for all the rest of our animals. Tell me what you think. May you be like the animals in the Garden of Eden, who we're told were all able to live together peacefully without any type of difficulty, even the predators somehow. It's a miracle. Amen. To conclude our service this evening, please turn to page 321 in our prayer books for Adon Olam, Ala Natan.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach B'terem Kol, Yetzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, V'chefzo Kol Hazai Melech, Shemo Nikra, V'charei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nora, V'hu Haya V'hu Hoveh, V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara, V'hu Echad V'ein Sheni Lehamshir Lo Lehachbira, V'li Reshit V'li Tachlit, V'lo Ha'oz V'hamisra. Adon Olam, Asher Malach B'terem Kol, Yetzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, V'chefzo Kol Hazai Melech, Shemo Nikra, V'hu Eli V'chai Gwali V'tzur Chevli B'yitzara, V'hu Nisi Umanus Li Menat Kosi B'yom Ekra, V'yahado Afkid Ruchi B'eit Ishan V'ayra, V'im Ruchi Giviyati Adonai Li V'lo Ira. Adon Olam, Asher Malach B'terem Kol, Yetzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, V'chefzo Kol Hazai Melech, Shemo Nikra. Adonai oz le'amo yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom.
May we all be blessed in the coming week with health, with strength, with joy, and with love. Shabbat Shalom.